Chapter 1571. Wait. Nolace turned his head around to call her. There was no emotion in his voice as he said, "Since we don't know each other, I don't think I've offended you before." He had no idea why, but he did not like her attitude either. Daisy turned around sideways and looked at his face. "Go back and think about it yourself. After all." She paused for a few seconds before the words slowly tumbled out of her lips, "I just don't like you." Waylon and Colton were worried about Daisy, so they followed her to the backyard, but upon seeing this scene, they knew their worries were uncalled for. Daisy was naive and prone to trust people, but it was only applied to those who were not in a bad relationship with her. There was one thing about her that was similar to their mother: they would not forget those bad things that other people had done to them. Daisy would never forget those hurtful words Nolace had thrown at her even though he himself did not remember them. She still couldn't forgive him. She couldn't forgive this friend of hers who had deceived her before. Forget about it. "I don't want to talk to you anymore." Daisy hurriedly walked past him. Nolace did not say anything. He just looked at her figure that was slowly disappearing in his vision and fell into thought. As evening approached, Nicholas ordered a table of good dishes to be prepared to entertain his distinguished guests. Maisie and Nolan also did the honors and talked to Tristan. While the adults were talking, the kids were eating and rarely spoke to each other. Daisy was sitting between Waylon and Colton, while Nolace sat opposite them. She raised her head, and when she met his glance, she hurriedly lowered her head back again. She kept poking at a piece of meat on her plate with her fork as if she was holding a grudge against it. Suddenly, Nicholas exclaimed, "The Victoria Business College has accepted Nolace?" Tristan nodded and smiled. "Yes. They promised to keep a spot for Nolace so that he can attend when he reaches the age of 15. Colton lifted his eyelids and said, "Victoria Business College? So? My brother and I can enter as well if we want to." Nicholas let out a hearty laugh and said, "You two sure have a lot of confidence in yourselves." Tristan smiled and said, "Well, they are a lot like Nolan." Nolan chimed in matter-of-factly. "They have the capabilities to back themselves up, so of course, they don't need to be modest." Modesty was a traditional virtue and an attitude. Most people insisted on keeping a low profile and being euphemistic and humble, which was true. Some people thought it was arrogant for someone to show too much of their abilities and talents. However, he did not think it was right. He preferred his children to be able to stand up to challenges. If they thought they could do something, they should go straight for it and value efficiency over euphemism. For example, Colton had a lot of confidence in himself. Although he might get over his head sometimes, he would get back up on his feet and get stronger with every setback. He also knew that Nolace had dethroned Colton and gotten first place in the class back then. However, Colton had not gotten discouraged. Instead, he had made it his goal to surpass Nolace. Therefore, he had never once criticized him for his confidence. This was because he had faith in his own son. Talented people wanted other people to look at them, and those who were capable hoped that others would see their talents and ability as well. Working hard to get ahead and strive to achieve recognition from others was not considered arrogant. As long as one could stick to themselves, lead a fulfilling life, and not feel ashamed of themselves, they did not have to care about how other people looked at them. After the dinner, Nicholas asked the maid to get 2 rooms for Tristan and Nolace. Tristan did not reject his kindness and decided to stay for one night. When Daisy went upstairs to her room, she ran into Nolace in the corridor. Chapter 1572. Nolace was standing in front of the wall, gazing at a painting. The painting was called Fallen Angels, and it was a gift Violet had given Daisy when she returned from Octavia. She did not know why he was looking at the painting. She did not know what he was doing in front of the painting, but she was not interested to know about it. She pretended she did not see him and walked past him. Suddenly, Nolace opened his mouth and said, "What an interesting painting." She stopped in her tracks and looked at him in astonishment. She turned to look at the painting again, and honestly, she did not care so much about the symbolism of the painting. She just felt that it was a good painting. However, his words had successfully piqued her curiosity. What else did you see from the painting? Nolace fixed his gaze on the painting and said indifferently, at first glance, we only see the world saving the angels who have fallen to earth and lost their wings, but after taking a longer look, you will find that it's the world that binds the angels. Daisy turned her head around and looked at the painting. It was just that no matter how she looked at the painting, it looked like the world was trying to send the angels back to heaven. She turned to look at him and asked, what makes you think so? Nolace turned his head sideways and met her confused gaze. Her gaze was pure and clean. It was something that couldn't be found in people with complicated minds. She was so pure, like a white sheet of paper. He did not know why, but had the urge to destroy the purity. Hello? Anybody there? I'm asking you a question, but why are you looking at me like that? Daisy averted her gaze. Could it be that he's laughing at me for my inability to appreciate art? Something flitted across Nala's eyes as he averted his gaze. Are you sure they're reaching their hands out to save the angels? They could also be trying to drag the angels down to earth. The angels are wingless. Their hands and feet are chained by the people, and they have lost their freedom. Angels represent salvation and goodness, but when the goodness of angels becomes a shackle that people use to bind them, then the angels have lost the meaning of their existence. After he finished speaking, he turned his head to look at the dumbfounded Daisy. There are two symbols in this painting. The first meaning is the one you all see, and the second meaning is that evil will run rampant when goodness becomes a shackle that binds freedom. You understand now? Daisy felt incredible. She looked at the painting again, and this time, she was able to see the hidden side that Nolace was talking about. Her eyes glowed, and she said, "You're so awesome. How can you even see that?" As soon as the words escaped her lips, she hurriedly covered her mouth. How could I compliment him? After that, she said, I'm not complimenting you. I admit that you're smart, but for me, Colton and Waylon are smarter than you. Nolace looked at her and said, your brothers are indeed smart. Of course. Daisy crossed her arms in front of her chest. Colton and Waylon are very smart. Although they... Daisy. Colton's voice rang out and interrupted her. If he did not show up right now, he was certain that she was going to sell both of them out. She was stunned. Colton? It seems like you're having a lot of fun talking to him. Colton's expression was dark. Did this stupid girl get tricked again by his sweet words? I'm not having fun. She went toward him and continued. I'm going back to my room. She entered her room and closed the door, leaving Colton and Nolace to stare at each other in the corridor. Frowning, Colton said, I warn you. Stay away from my sister. Nolace smiled and said, it's her own freedom to do what she wants. Even though you're her brother, don't you think you've crossed the line? Colton took a step forward and grabbed him by his collar. Nolace, if you lost your memories, then I suggest you stay that way. Stop trying to pull any funny tricks on her. Chapter 1573. Nolace pulled Colton's hand away from him slowly and said, what kind of funny tricks am I going to pull on her? Colton wanted to say something but stopped himself in the end. He said, just stay away from her. After that, he turned around and left. The next day, by the time Daisy and her brothers went downstairs, Nolace and Tristan were having breakfast with Nicholas. Nicholas shook his head and said, it's not good to get up so late and keep the guests waiting. Tristan smiled. It's fine. It's the holiday season right now, so it's understandable that they want to sleep a little bit longer. Daisy pulled the chair and sat down. Just when she was going to pick up the piece of sandwich in front of her, Nolace reached out for it as well. Both of them lifted their heads at the same time. Nicholas and Tristan looked at them as well. Seeing that Nolace was not going to back down, Daisy did not back down either. Hey, I picked up this piece first. You didn't write your name on it. Why you? Nicholas cleared his throat and chimed in. Daisy, no lace is our guest. As one of the Goldmen, I believe that you know you shouldn't fight with your guests, right? No lace lifted his eyebrows at her. Daisy withdrew her hand and said, all right. You can have the sandwich. Go ahead and eat it. I hope you get choked to death. However, no lace put the sandwich on her plate, and Nicholas's eyes glowed. He could see his intention, but he was not going to say anything. Looking at the dumbfounded Daisy, he smiled and said, ladies first. Colton was so exasperated that he nearly broke his fork in half. What a scheming bastard. Contrary to Colton's exasperation, Waylon was calmer. There was no expression on his face, as he would not allow anyone to read his mind. Daisy looked at the sandwich on her plate and was rendered speechless. Even though she couldn't forgive No Lace for everything he said to her back then, she did not hate him. At that moment, Nicholas laughed and said, all of them are about the same age, so I think they'll get along well together. How about you guys stay for a few more days? Tristan was taken aback and looked at No Lace as if he was going to let him decide. Without any hesitation, No Lace replied, all right then, Grandpa Nicholas. I'll stay for a few more days. Nicholas nodded and turned to the three Rugrats. What do you think? Colton was about to say something, but Waylon stopped him and said, we're fine with it. No Lace looked at him. After they finished their breakfast, Colton and Waylon came to the courtyard. Why did you agree to let them stay, brother? His hunch told him that No Lace was up to something no good. Waylon turned around and said, I don't know about No Lace, but I know he isn't an ordinary folk. Besides, Dad helped you hide the fact that you hacked into their company. If you continue to go against them, you'll put Dad in a difficult position. In other words, No Lace knew that Colton was the one who had hacked into their company, but nobody knew if he would tell anyone about it or not. Besides, due to their grandmother, they must not get into a conflict with the Knowles because of this matter. Other than not wanting to put his father in a difficult position, Waylon also wanted to use this chance to observe No Lace. Colton fell silent. Waylon patted his shoulder and said, Colton, I know you're worried about Daisy. Putting those things he did in the past aside, he is no inferior to either you or me. To put it simply, understanding our enemy won't do us harm. Besides, didn't you pick No Lace over Zafir too? Colton was tongue-tied. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and said, who told you that I picked No Lace over Zafir? I said that because I wanted Aunt Violet to drop that thought. Zafir and No Lace were two different kinds of people. He did not like Zafir because he thought he was a hypocrite and a master of disguise. On the other hand, No Lace was not a hypocrite but scheming. He gave off the impression that you thought you could see through him, but in reality, you couldn't see through him at all. Chapter 1574. Meanwhile, Daisy went to the backyard to play with Goldbar. Goldbar was rolling and running here and there in the grass energetically. When she saw it running toward her, Daisy smiled and held out her hand to grab it. Little did she expect that Goldbar would run past her and head straight toward the person behind her back. She turned her head around to see Goldbar stopping beside No Lace and sniffing him. Goldbar, she shouted exasperatedly. She stormed toward it and grabbed it up from the ground. I'm your owner. Why didn't you listen to me? Goldbar looked at her with its innocent puppy eyes. She glanced at No Lace and asked, what are you doing here? No Lace replied calmly, I'm here for a walk. He glanced at the puppy in her arms and continued. Is its name Goldbar? Daisy carried Goldbar back to its kennel. Do you have a problem with that? Following behind her, No Lace fell silent for a while before commenting, what a lousy name. She harumphed. Humph. You know nothing. Ultra rustic is the new chic. You just don't know how to appreciate it. After a short while of silence, a chuckle rang out behind her. Daisy turned around to look at him, but he looked normal. It was like the person who had chuckled out loud just now was not him. No Lace took in the surroundings and said, this place feels familiar to me. Really? She rubbed Goldbar absent-mindedly. She finally saw it now. He did not fake his amnesia. He really had lost his memory. Nolace did not know what was on her mind, but she looked a little bit down right now. She did not notice it when the fallen leaves that were blown by the wind landed on top of her head. Nolace stopped beside her. He stretched his arm forward, and it was only then Daisy realized something. She subconsciously lifted her head and asked, "What are you doing?" He showed her the fallen leaf in his hand. Daisy touched her head and slowly got to her feet. Nolace. He stiffened slightly when she called his name. A strange feeling spread from his heart, but it soon disappeared, and he became calm again. Yeah? She pressed her lips, but did not say the words out in the end. Forget about it. You take your time. When Daisy was about to leave, Nolace called out to her. I'm not familiar with your house's courtyard. If you're not familiar, then how did you get here? I'm your guest. Don't you think you should show me around? He said matter-of-factly. Daisy did not know if she should laugh or get angry right now. We have maids here. You can ask them to show you around. Nolace smiled at her, but his smile did not reach his eyes. So, this is how the Goldman treat your guests? Asking the maid to entertain your guests? Daisy went closer to him and said, I get it now. You said yes to my grandfather's request because you want to boss me around, right? I'm not bossing you around. Gritting her teeth, Daisy said, fine. I'll show you around. Both of them walked one after another in the large garden. Daisy was playing with the branch in her hands, and she deliberately led him to some corners where he could easily get lost. She was trying to prank him and vent her anger. However, after Nolace looked around the surroundings, he squinted and asked, You're going to leave me here, right? Daisy was stunned. She did not expect him to see through her intention and did not dare to look him in the eyes. Nope. You just said you want me to show you around, but you didn't say where you want to go. Standing behind her, Nolace said, People often get nervous when they're lying. Since he had seen through her intention, Daisy turned around to look at him and said, So what if I want to leave you alone here? Have you forgotten that you left? The word me did not come out of her mouth. She shut her mouth shut, and Nolace stared at her intently. What did I leave behind? This is it. This is the last piece of the puzzle. Daisy turned her head sideways and replied, Nothing. I just want to prank you and vent off my spleen. Did something happen to us in the past? Chapter 1575. The breeze was cold as it blew through the walkway, coiling the girl's hair with the boy's collar together, just like the invisible thread of fate that had long bound the two to each other. Daisy suddenly went closer to him and said, Go and figure it out yourself. Blurg. She made a funny face at him and ran away. Nolace couldn't help but chuckle. In fact, even he himself did not know why he wanted to be close to her. Perhaps it was because he felt relaxed when she was with him. In the evening, Tristan was having dinner at a club with a friend of his who was doing business in Basburg. His friend filled his glass and asked with a smile, Did you come to Basburg with young Mr. Knowles? Tristan nodded. He lifted the glass and replied, I brought him back so he can learn more about things that happen in another country. In fact, he did not want to say that he had brought him to help him get his memory back. His friend chucked. I'm sure young Mr. Knowles can learn about things that happen in another country in his own country. Kids nowadays are getting better and better. Some of them are even better than us. Tristan smiled. You're right. I heard that he has started to take over the Knowles. I'm afraid it won't take long before he becomes an outstanding young man. He looked at Tristan and continued. At that time, it would be the rising of the Knowles. Tristan smiled but did not say anything. The waitress who came in with the drinks carefully placed the wine on the table. When she heard the name Knowles, her hand accidentally knocked over the glass on the table, and the wine spilled over the table. The waiter stood there nervously, not knowing what to do. Tristan's friend looked at her gloomily and asked, What's wrong with you? She slowly lifted her head but did not dare to look at them. I'm sorry about that. He froze when he saw how youthful her face was. Even though she was wearing makeup, it did not go well with her face. How old are you? Are you an adult? The supervisor of the club rushed over when he heard the commotion. When he saw the broken glass on the floor, he glared at Lisa before turning his head around and saying ingratiatingly, I'm sorry. She's new here, so she hasn't gotten the hang of it yet. To show our apology, I'll give you another bottle of wine for free. The man sitting beside Tristan asked, You guys hire underage here? The supervisor's expression changed, but he retained the smile on his face as he explained, She isn't underaged. She just turned 18. She has a petite figure, so everyone thinks that she's underage. Even if she was underage, he could not admit it. Once it was found out, it would bring trouble to the club. Tristan waved his hand. All right. You can go out now. Since they were not going to press the matter, the supervisor smiled and nodded. Thank you for your understanding. I'll get someone to bring you a new bottle of wine now. He led Lisa away from the private room. When they arrived at the staff restroom, the supervisor reprimanded her sternly, You'd better be careful. Don't be so clumsy anymore. I hired you because of Ivanka. If there's another time, you'll be fired. Lisa bit her lips in aggravation and lowered her head. I promise I won't do it again. The supervisor turned around and went back to his workstation. Liza turned her head to look at herself in the mirror and bit her lips tightly. She was wearing a waitress uniform. After being expelled from the school, no school dared to accept her. She had just done one thing wrong and was robbed of the opportunity to go to school. It was because they were powerful and influential people, and she had no background. She detested this unfair world. Suddenly, she remembered the things she had heard in the private room. Only now did she find out that Noel Ace was the descendant of the Knowles in Yarramore. Back then, she, Daisy, Colton, and Noel Ace had been studying in the same class. However, she did not know about Noel's identity. She had been under the impression he was just a transfer student with good grades. Chapter 1576. The main thing is that Noel Ace has amnesia now. Lisa suddenly made up her mind. Tristan and his friends left the private room. After they bid each other goodbye, he brought his driver to the parking lot. The driver opened the door for him. When he was about to get into the car, a voice suddenly came from behind. Uncle Tristan. Tristan turned his head around and looked around. It was the young waitress who had served them in the private room earlier that day. But she addressed himself as Uncle Tristan, which made Tristan a little confused. Do you know me? Lisa behaved very well. Actually, I didn't do it on purpose just now. I made a mistake only because I heard you mention Noel Ace. He narrowed his eyes. Were you and Noel Ace classmates? Lisa did not deny it. Yes, and Daisy and Colton too. We used to be classmates. Seeing that she even knew Colton and Daisy and could utter the name of his nephew, Tristan did not have much doubt but only took a better look at her a few times. You're so young, why would you come out here to work in a club? She's similar in age to Noel Ace and the others, so this young girl is only 14 years old, but she's working as a waiter in a club. Lisa lowered her head. Of course, she did not dare to tell the truth. I'm working during the winter break. My mother died at a young age, and my father is sick, so I want to relieve some of the burdens on my family. She knew that elders liked filial and well-behaved kids. She had stepped into society earlier than her peers, so she had learned how to be extremely tactful when it came to distinguishing other people. Many wealthy businessmen who started their business from nothing would act extremely arrogantly after making money and building their status. They would look down upon others, especially those who worked as part-time workers. Genuine people from the upper social circles would have self-discipline and grace. They were usually very smart, knowing that there was no need to care too much about social class differences, because that would only lower their own identity. Thus, she bet that Tristan would not look down on her. She had managed to move Tristan just a tad bit in just a few simple sentences. "You're quite a filial girl. Uncle Tristan, I accidentally heard what you said just now. You claimed that Knollys has lost his memory. How did he lose his memory?" Lisa knew that by using her relationship with Knollys, she might be able to take the opportunity to get closer to Tristan as if she were only here to ask about her classmate's condition. However, she had underestimated Tristan. Tristan had been rolling about in the business circles for decades, and he had traveled in and out of various circles back then. He had experienced all sorts of highs and lows and witnessed the unpredictability of humans' minds and hearts. What was more, Knollys' amnesia was a matter of the Knolls. Hence, when Tristan heard this question, his expression dimmed slightly. "This isn't something that you should ask." Lisa was flustered. She was confident that she had not exposed her intention. She lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry, I might have crossed a line." Tristan didn't say anything else, got into the car, and motioned the driver to drive. Looking at the backlight of the car, Lisa clenched the hands that were resting on her sides. During breakfast the next morning, Nicholas suggested that Nolan bring Colton to the company to get him acquainted. After all, he planned to train Colton at a younger age. Maisie paused for a bit. "Isn't this a little too early?" Nicholas explained eloquently, "This isn't considered too early. Nolan started going to the company at an even younger age than Colton. Colton did not object to his grandfather's proposal. On the contrary, he was interested. "Grandpa, I'll study hard with Dad." Nicholas nodded in satisfaction, then looked at Waylon. "Come with me in the afternoon. I'm going to go fishing." Waylon did not reject it. "Okay." Daisy chewed her fork and squinted. "Grandpa, Colton, and Waylon have something to do, so what should I do?" Nicholas smiled and suggested, "Just bring Knollys out and enjoy your time with him." Waylon was rendered speechless. Chapter 1577. Colton was also at a loss for words. "It's no wonder Grandpa would make such arrangements for us." So, this was his plan all this while. Nolan had seen through his father's thoughts long ago, so he narrowed his eyes slightly. "Isn't this a little inappropriate? He's planning to let Daisy spend more time with that kid? I can't agree with that." "How is it inappropriate?" Nicholas glared at him and ate his breakfast slowly. After all, they were once classmates, so how is it inappropriate for Daisy to help Knollys recover his memory? They're just kids. What do you think can happen while they're out? It was Nolan's turn to be rendered speechless. "What Dad said is true. There's no way that I can refute that. Indeed, the two of them are just kids. But at this age, plenty of kids have started to get into their puppy love. If Daisy were to fall in love with that kid, wouldn't all the precautions that I've taken all this while be flushed down the drain by her grandfather?" Nolan calmed down and turned to look at her. "Daisy, what do you think?" It was obvious that he was hoping she would refuse. Daisy felt pressured when she saw her two brothers and father staring at her. She did not know what to do. "Are you boys looking for a beating? You can pamper her, but you're overdoing it now." Maisie slammed her fork against the dining table and reprimanded them. "As long as they know where to draw the line, Daisy can do whatever she wants. She's grown up and has to learn to distinguish and handle things by herself. It's not up to you to supervise her when she's doing everything. You may think you're protecting her now, but will she grow up into a useful woman if she is kept under your protection all this while? If Daisy is allowed to only live according to their wishes and plans, she'll never be able to face the world by herself in the future. All she will think about when encountering difficulties will be her brothers and father. Even when it's time to decide on something, she won't choose something according to what she truly wants deep down. Her decision will be made based on her brothers and father's wishes. If she's raised exactly as they wish, she won't grow up into a human but a puppet instead." Nolan shut up immediately, lowered his head, and ate his breakfast. "My wife is pissed now. I mustn't utter another word. I don't want to sleep on the couch tonight." As for Waylon and Colton, they did not dare to say a single word. They were usually very brazen kids, but keeping things to themselves while their mother was furious was the key to survival. Nicholas shook his head. Since ancient times, the mother is usually the loving one while the father is the strict one in a family, but when it comes to the Goldman, everything is the other way around. Thank God I saw the willpower in Maisie back then. Otherwise, which woman in the world would have the ability to hold back Nolan and the kids? At noon, Daisy went out with Nolace, and Edison was in charge of driving them out. Nolace looked out the window and observed the hustle and bustle of the streets. Is there any fun place to go in Basburg? Daisy crossed her arms. The amorous foodie street. He retracted his gaze and stared at her suspiciously. Do you come out only for the food? Why would I come out if it's not for the food? It's so tiring to go shopping. If you don't want to go there, I'll go there by myself. In fact, I've long wanted to come out, especially today. It's the Basburg Food Festival. If Waylon and Colton were to have come out with me, they would never agree to let me eat those things. But I won't have to think about all that when I'm out with Nolace. Nolace fell silent for a while and then said to Edison, bring us to the amorous foodie street. The Basburg Food Festival was crowded with people. The shops on the left and right sides of the streets were all selling various kinds of food, and the food trucks and stalls went on and on down the street. Daisy fought her way through the crowd, skittered around, and bought everything she saw and thought was delicious. Nolace followed her closely. He had lost his appetite when he saw the food that was placed outside. His eyes were fixed on Daisy's bright and content face. These ordinary foods could actually make her so happy. She turned around abruptly and rammed into his arms. Ouch! Daisy yelled and rubbed her nose. Why are you standing behind me without making any noise? Chapter 1578. Nolace's expression didn't change. Then why would you turn around all of a sudden? Daisy choked on her own words, walked around him, and passed by him. Daisy held the bucket of skewers in one hand and ate them with the other while walking down the street, while Nolace followed her and did not buy or eat any food. She stopped and handed him one of the skewers in her hand. Here you go. I'm not going to eat that. Okay, then forget about it. I don't want to share them with him either. However, before she could finish eating all the skewers, she started to feel unwell in her lower abdomen, and the pain was borderline unbearable. Nolace noticed something and supported her. What's wrong with you? I'm not feeling too well. Nolace frowned and said sternly, these things are unsanitary, and yet you've eaten so much of them. You deserve this. Daisy wanted to refute him, but she was completely speechless. She squatted down while covering her abdomen, suffering big time. Nolace picked her up. I'll take you to the hospital. He carried her, dashed back to the car, and instructed Edison to drive them to the hospital. Seeing Daisy's face getting paler, Nolace was genuinely worried for the first time. Daisy, you better don't die on me. Edison parked the car at the entrance of the hospital. He got out of the car and wanted to take Daisy from Nolace, but got rejected. Edison looked at Nolace, who went straight into the hospital with Daisy in his arms, and felt a little surprised. The young master has never been so nervous before. The doctor ran a few tests and then asked the nurse to take over. The nurse walked up to the hospital bed and asked with a smile, "Young lady, how old are you?" Daisy was lying on her side, with her hands on her lower abdomen. "I'm 14. After answering the question, she asked in a daze, "Do I have any terminal illness?" The nurse laughed out loud and explained patiently, "This isn't a terminal disease. This is a girl's period. You'll undergo this period once every month after you've reached a certain age and are mature." Enough. A period. Daisy took a deep breath. It was not that she had never attended a biology class. So, of course, she knew exactly what it was. So, is my shark week here already? The nurse enlightened her patiently, "Yes, in fact, don't be afraid. This is your very first period. That's why you're feeling slight discomfort. And remember, when you're on your period, don't consume too much spicy and cold food or beverages. Daisy buried her face into the pillow. Okay. Someone please kill me. This is so embarrassing. Who knew that my Aunt Flo would knock on my door at this time? After the nurse left, Nolace walked into the ward. Daisy covered her face with the blanket and did not even dare to look at him. He stopped by the bed, and after learning what was going on, he felt a little embarrassed too. I'll take you back. She showed her eyes from under the blanket and nodded. When she got home, Daisy went back to her room to rest. She did not dare to move too much, because she was afraid of her blood overflowing. She even refused to go downstairs for dinner and asked the servants to bring the food up for her. Maisie noticed Daisy's strangeness and went to her room. Daisy? Daisy leaned on the head of the bed with a distressed expression. Mom, why would my period be so uncomfortable? Maisie was startled and then burst into laughter. My Daisy has finally grown up. Maisie stretched out her hand and stroked the top of Daisy's head. You're undergoing your first period, the discomfort will only go on for a few days, and it's not as serious as you think it is. So, don't lie down and sit all day. You should move around just like when things are normal, okay? Daisy nodded obediently. When Maisie walked out of the room, she caught the two brothers eavesdropping outside the door. Colton scratched his head in embarrassment. Waylon, and I thought Daisy was sick, that's why we. Your sister is on her period. She is a big girl now. You brothers mustn't treat her like a baby sister anymore. Chapter 1579. Colton and Waylon exchanged gazes and said in unison. Okay, Mom. After a week, Daisy's period had come to an end. The sun was shining bright and warm. She stood in the courtyard and did some stretching, and when she turned around, she saw Leah and Zafir standing outside the gate. Leah waved at her. Daisy came to the gate and looked at them in surprise. Leah, Zafir, why are you here? Leah showed her the tickets that she had bought on her cell phone. We're going to watch a movie. The theater has a new movie, and I bought 3 tickets in advance. Daisy did not want to go to the movies at first, but Leah had bought the tickets in advance, and she and Zafir had come to her doorsteps to invite her in person. It would be rude if she were to refuse to go with them. She was about to agree when Colton's voice came from behind. Count me in too. Leah gave off a fake chuckle. Coleman, is it fun to follow your sister around all the time? I purposely bought 3 tickets and invited Daisy only to help Zafir out. Even a blind person can see that Zafir has a thing for Daisy. However, her brothers are like watchdogs. Whoever approaches their sister will surely die under their jaws. The corners of Colton's lips twitched slightly as he crossed his arms. Am I not welcomed? Leah gnashed her teeth. Zafir gave off a faint smile. Of course not. Come with us then. Count me in too. Nala's appearance surprised everyone. Leah and Zafir had never seen him before. Daisy, who is? Before Daisy could answer the question, Colton answered calmly. This is, of course, the young master of the Knolls, Nolace Knolls. Leah did not know who he was, but it was impossible for Zafir not to know about him. Violet would have definitely told him about Nolace. Zafir looked at Daisy subconsciously as soon as he heard the name, but his gaze did not stay on her for too long. It turns out to be the young master of the Knolls. Nolace squinted and looked indifferent. Do you know me? He did not want to come at first. It was just that, seeing that Daisy was about to join them for some fun from afar, he could not help but want to come over. Zafir nodded. I've heard a lot about you. Nala's gaze clashed with that of his, but he did not utter a single word. Eventually, the 5 of them went to the theater together. Leah's face looked extremely gloomy. The 2 extra people had ruined the plan that she had come up with. Originally, she had arranged for Daisy to sit right next to Zafir, but now, Colton had become the one who sat right next to Zafir, while Daisy was seated in between Colton and Nolace. After the movie, the five of them came out of the theater. Daisy walked up to Leah and whispered, "Sorry, Leah, I didn't know that they would tag along." Leah smiled and claimed, "It's fine by me. There's always tomorrow." After hearing it, Colton chuckled. "You're so persistent, Leah. Nothing in her mind can escape my eyes." Zafir is quite an opportunist. He really knows how to take advantage of Leah's friendship to approach Daisy. Leah glared at him. "Thank you for your compliment." Zafir did not say anything from the beginning to the end. When they arrived at the entrance of a cafe, he asked Daisy in a soft voice, "Do you want something to drink?" Daisy smiled and nodded. "Okay." It just so happened that she was thirsty. However, she did not notice the subtle and delicate change in Colton and Nala's expressions. These two boys would only put up a united front when it came to this matter. Zafir took Daisy and Leah into the cafe, and Colton followed them immediately. Nole stood in place and looked at the figures who were standing in the cafe. His intuition told him that the boy named Zafir seemed to be interested in Daisy. Chapter 1580. Nala's gaze turned slightly cold upon thinking of this. "Noles." A figure interrupted his thoughts, and he turned around slowly, and the girl standing not far away waved at him. Noles frowned. He did not remember who she was, but the other party clearly knew him. He then turned his head, looked at the people in the cafe, and walked toward her with a sullen face. "Who are you?" Lisa squeezed her sleeves nervously and gave off a smile. "Can I take up a few minutes of your time?" In the cafe, Daisy bought Noles a latte. She turned around and looked at the entrance, but realized that Noles was nowhere to be seen. Noles stopped in the corridor next to the elevator, an area in the mall where not many people passed by, and looked at Lisa indifferently. "Who are you?" "Noles, don't get me wrong." Lisa waved her hand and said with a smile, "I know you don't remember me, but it's okay. I can understand." Noles frowned. "She calls me by my name." It seems that I had indeed studied in Zlokova before this. But how would she know about my amnesia? Seeing his skeptical look, Lisa pursed her lips and explained, "Actually, Daisy told me about your amnesia. You may not remember this, but Daisy and I used to be best friends. I can't tell him that I heard it by accident." Although Noles has lost his memory, he's still having fun with Daisy and the others. Noles should remember me. We were classmates, after all. It seems that he's indeed an amnesiac. Noles inserted his hands in his pockets. "Why should I trust you?" Lisa looked at him. "Because I know about you, you encountered danger when you were in Octavia, didn't you?" Noles lowered his gaze. "Uncle Tristan did tell me about this. I ran into danger in Octavia right before the accident." Seeing that Noles did not refute her, Lisa breathed a sigh of relief secretly. She knew that Daisy and Noles had experienced danger in Octavia. Nobody asked Daisy to trust me blindly and tell me everything back then. Noles and Daisy fell out with each other before they left Octavia. Anyway, with her family background, one friend less won't mean anything to her, so I might as well take this credit for myself. As long as Noles believes that I was the one who encountered the danger with him back then, I'll be able to take this opportunity to become his savior and the benefactor of the Knolls. And when the time comes, I'll be able to escape from poverty. Daisy, you're the one who's left me with nowhere else to go first, so don't blame me for this. Noles, we were together when you were in danger in Octavia. We were locked in a small room, and I was the one who gave you food. Although you don't remember it, I remember it. Noles was stunned as if some memory fragments were flashing across his mind. They were all fragmented and very confusing. There was a vague outline and appearance of a girl, but he still could not remember who it was. Lisa walked up to him. "It's okay. I believe that you'll remember it someday in the future." After saying that, she took out a piece of paper with her contact number written on it. "This is my number. If you wish to look for me, I'll be available at any time." Noles took the paper from her, and Lisa was overjoyed. But when she thought of something, she said, "By the way, please don't tell Daisy about our brief meeting, okay?" He lifted his gaze. "Why?" "Because Daisy doesn't like me very much and doesn't like me being close to you. Her brother hates you because you had better grades than him when we were studying at school, and Daisy felt the same about you too. She told me that you're not a good guy, but I didn't believe in her. That's why she threatened me."